Chapter 11. No sense of humor. Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne were stunned, their minds completely blank. In their eyes, Ethan Blackwood's image had greatly improved after their interaction these past 2 days. This sudden action truly shocked them both. "Ouch, don't pinch me, Miss Lynn, spare me. I was just trying to provoke them. Ethan. I'm a man of integrity. How could I take advantage of you?" Ethan grimaced, whispering. "Wow, so that's how it is." Isabel nodded, immediately dismissing it. Instead, she leaned closer to Ethan cooperatively. "You airheaded idiot." Gia, Ethan, I'll settle the score with you later." Sophia bared her small canine teeth, glaring fiercely at Ethan. Her pretty face was like a small teapot boiling over. This was the first time a boy had held her. And he claimed to be hers. HMPH, what shamelessness, if it weren't to enrage the enemy. She wouldn't let this guy hold her. Indeed, things unfolded exactly as Ethan had predicted. Guan Sheng and Lucas Everhart on the cliff nearly fell off in anger. Their eyes were wide with rage, their pupils almost bursting from their sockets. Lucas Everhart was furious. Although he had given up pursuing Sophia Ashbourne, seeing his enemy Ethan Blackwood succeed still filled him with immense anger. As for Guan Sheng, he felt that Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne were already in his grasp. Now they belonged to Ethan Blackwood. It was like snatching food from his mouth. The duck he had caught had flown away. How could he not be enraged? "Ethan Blackwood, don't let me catch you. I'll cripple your hands and feet and make you wish you were dead," Guan Sheng roared. "Come on, you coward. I'm waiting right here, if you don't come down. Don't blame me for looking down on you. I'll give you 5 minutes, after which I won't wait," Ethan said with a smug grin, hugging Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne as he sat on the ground, gazing up at the cliff with a "what can you do about it" expression. "Are you guys coming down? Otherwise, Sophia and I are leaving with Ethan Blackwood." Isabel playfully added fuel to the fire with a smile. Gia. "Shut up, Ethan Blackwood, you scoundrel. I won't let you off later." Sophia Ashbourne's face turned crimson, and she gritted her teeth as she whispered. This scoundrel was truly blatant, shamelessly taking advantage. Guan Sheng was on the verge of exploding. He had never been provoked like this in his life. "Collect vines for me, quickly," Guan Sheng roared. "Didn't you hear Brother Sheng's orders? Hurry up!" Lucas Everhart echoed the shout. "You too." Before he could finish, Guan Sheng suddenly slapped Lucas Everhart hard on the head, nearly sending him toppling over the cliff. Soon, over a dozen people returned with long vines, enough to make 3 ropes. "Let's go down all 3 at once. The first thing we do upon landing is capture Ethan Blackwood. Remember, keep him alive. I want to make him unable to live and unable to die," Guan Sheng roared. Guan Sheng pointed to 3 people. The 3 subordinates reluctantly tied vines and began descending the cliff. Compared to their agitation, Ethan Blackwood sat below calmly, hugging the 2 girls with enjoyment, watching the scene above like a monkey show. "Ethan Blackwood, they're really coming down," Isabel said nervously. "Heth, as long as I, Ethan, am here. They won't be able to come down. I can cut things remotely," Ethan said arrogantly. "Wow, I don't believe you." Although Isabel often played along with Ethan, she wasn't foolish. Ethan Blackwood suddenly stood up, saying proudly, "Don't believe me, watch closely, swish, swish, swish." As Ethan Blackwood pointed his finger 3 times, the 3 vines hanging on the cliff actually snapped in response. "Ugh!" With 3 screams in unison. The 3 individuals descending the cliff fell directly from a height of over 40 meters, instantly becoming unrecognizable. "Ethan Blackwood, you're actually that amazing," Isabel exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Silly Gia, the vines they used are different from the ones we used before," Sophia Ashbourne, with her much sharper perceptiveness, immediately noticed something was wrong. "You have no sense of humor at all." Ethan Blackwood pouted, feeling his dramatic pose was wasted. How could ordinary vines compare to the tenacity of the Higger dragon vine? However, the Higger dragon vine looked almost identical to the other vines. Apart from experienced individuals like Ethan Blackwood, others couldn't distinguish them. Guan Sheng was completely dumbfounded, with the loss of 3 more subordinates. Coupled with Lucas Everhart, he now had only 10 people left. In just 2 days of pursuit, he had lost half his men. Damn it, find me more. Find vines as strong as this one. Guan Sheng was not foolish, knowing he couldn't descend in a short time. He pulled up the remaining half of the Higger dragon vine and instructed his remaining subordinates to search for vines similar to it. This is boring, I'm leaving, Ethan Blackwood said loudly, yawning, and slowly walked away with a girl on each arm, much to the chagrin of Guan Sheng, Lucas Everhart, and the others, who could only watch with bloodshot eyes. Utterly helpless, there was no point in staying there any longer. It would take them an unknown amount of time to find the Higger dragon vine and break it. With no water or food nearby, Ethan Blackwood deeply regretted this otherwise. He could have stayed and dealt with them one by one. After they were out of sight, Ethan Blackwood immediately felt a sharp pain in his waist. Ouch! With a sudden cry, he saw Sophia Ashbourne pinching a small piece of flesh on his waist and giving it a full 360-degree twist. Ow, Miss Lynn. Spare me. Ethan Blackwood pleaded guiltily. Although he had said earlier that he was only trying to anger them, his hands had strayed a bit, clearly angering Sophia Ashbourne. HMPH, if I don't teach you a lesson. You'll get more out of hand. Gia, pinch him. Sophia Ashbourne's pretty face turned icy, and she snorted coldly. Okay. Isabel Hawthorne immediately pinched him from the other side, just as Ethan Blackwood was about to cry. He realized that she wasn't using much force. She winked at him subtly, secretly signaling him. You sneaky Gia, you're just pretending. Sophia Ashbourne was not blind and immediately saw through it. I can't help it. Sister Sophia, I'm so hungry, I have no strength, Isabel Hawthorne said, clutching her stomach and looking dejected again. Sophia Ashbourne was also a bit tired. Their last meal was half a rabbit last night. And it had been more than half a day since then, not to mention escaping for most of the night. Now, they were both tired and hungry. But just then, a baa-baa sound suddenly came from ahead. Wild goat. Ethan Blackwood's eyes lit up with joy, and he quickly led the 2 girls forward. As Ethan Blackwood expected, not far ahead, several wild goats were grazing with their heads bowed. Roasted leg of lamb, lamb ribs, lamb skewers, lamb kidneys, Isabel Hawthorne muttered, her mouth watering. This isn't a rabbit, it won't be as easy to catch. Sophia Ashbourne was also craving meat, but knew that wild goats were difficult to deal with. They were very agile and highly alert. Both girls looked at Ethan Blackwood, clearly seeking his opinion. Using just a knife, catching a wild goat is clearly impossible, Ethan Blackwood stated directly. Even in open terrain, humans couldn't outrun wild goats, let alone in a jungle. This was the wild goats' home turf, and they could disappear in an instant. However, we can use tools. Just as the 2 girls looked disappointed, Ethan Blackwood pouted and cut a bundle of cattail grass from nearby. How do we use this? Sophia Ashbourne's pretty eyes widened, but this time she didn't question him. As her time with Ethan Blackwood grew longer, her initial suspicion gradually turned into trust. Even though Ethan Blackwood had been disrespectful earlier, she hadn't taken it to heart. This fact surprised even Sophia Ashbourne herself. If any other guy had dared to act that way, she would have kicked him into eunuchdom long ago. This is cattail grass, and it's very useful. The leaves can be used to make clothes and start fires. As for the stems, they can be used as arrow shafts, Ethan Blackwood said as he trimmed the cattail leaves. He didn't need to make clothes or start a fire at the moment. He only needed arrow shafts. You want to hunt wild goats with a bow and arrow, But how do we make the bowstring? Isabel Hawthorne asked, her interest piqued. She dreamed of eating wild goat right now. However, she found it hard to imagine how Ethan Blackwood would produce a bowstring out of thin air. After making over a dozen arrow shafts, Ethan Blackwood fetched a piece of wood and many leaves. This is wood from the coconut palm, which has very high flexibility, making it very suitable for a bow. And the leaves of the pita palm, not only are they flexible, but when woven, they are also very elastic and can be used as a bowstring. Ethan Blackwood said as he shaped the wood, cutting notches on both ends and set it aside. Then, he carefully picked up the leaves of the pita palm. Pita palm leaves are very thick and have thorns on both sides. Ethan Blackwood first shaved off all the thorns, then broke them apart, and used his knife to separate the flesh. Discarding it, then he tore the remaining skin into strands, creating natural fibers. "I'll weave it," Isabel Hawthorne volunteered. She had exceptional skills in handicrafts. Her university major was in that field. Ethan Blackwood did not refuse. Weaving was not his forte. Chapter 12. The Native Woman. Soon, a light green bowstring was woven by Isabel Hawthorne. Not bad. Ethan Blackwood inspected the work and found it to be indeed better than what he could have woven. Isabel Hawthorne felt overjoyed. Not because she particularly valued Ethan Blackwood's praise. It was just that for the past 2 days, Ethan Blackwood had been doing almost everything. And she felt it was good to contribute in some way. Sophia Ashbourne bit her lip. She actually had a similar desire to do something, but so far, apart from Ethan Blackwood's Chinese letter request to handle the rabbit, she hadn't seemed to help with anything. Ethan Blackwood installed the bowstring and quietly crawled forward. Approaching a wild goat, he drew the bow and nocked an arrow. Whoosh! The arrow flew, but it directly embedded itself in a tree. Clearly, his aim was slightly off. Startled, the wild goat immediately scattered. Ethan Blackwood was somewhat disappointed. "It's okay, keep trying." Sophia Ashbourne, uncharacteristically, did not oppose him, but waved her small fists to encourage him. She could understand that shooting arrows wasn't always 100% accurate, especially at moving targets. Ethan Blackwood nodded slightly. It was indeed difficult to hit the target, and coupled with the psychological pressure of lacking food and decreased physical strength, his aim was even worse. You held the bow level earlier, causing your aim to drop. You need to hold the bow higher so that the arrow follows a parabolic trajectory downwards, which makes it easier to hit the target, Sophia Ashbourne added. Ethan Blackwood was taken aback. This time, it was his turn to be surprised. "You're a girl, and you know about archery." Sophia Ashbourne tilted her chin upwards in her signature proud manner. "My dad is a semi-professional archer. He also plays golf, polo, and fencing." She enumerated them like counting treasures. And Ethan Blackwood understood. As expected of Miss Lynn, the sports her father excelled at were all aristocratic pursuits. Generally, only the upper class had the opportunity to participate. Just then, the wild goats that had scattered earlier began to reappear in their sight. Hold the bow up so your eyes are level with the arrow. This allows for better extension of your back muscles and increases strength. Then, aim slightly above the target at the point where the bow and arrow meet, Sophia Ashbourne whispered. Ethan Blackwood humbly accepted her advice and followed it, drawing the bow and nocking another arrow. Whoosh! With a whistling sound through the air. It was indeed different from the momentum of the previous arrow. The arrow, like a shooting star, directly pierced the neck of a wild goat. Hooray! Isabel Hawthorne was ecstatic. Sophia Ashbourne, mimicking Ethan Blackwood's expression earlier, said calmly, "Well done." Ethan Blackwood chuckled wryly. It seemed this girl quite enjoyed being a teacher. "Let's process the wild goat." Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne volunteered. "No," "I'll do it this time." Ethan Blackwood refused. Unlike rabbits, wild goats were larger and provided more meat. It would be impossible to consume it all at once, and if not processed properly, the excess meat would be wasted. If Ethan Blackwood handled it, as long as it was processed correctly, they wouldn't have to worry about food for the next 3 days. But we can't start a fire. The two girls always wanted to contribute. But starting a fire was indeed difficult for them. Even with sore palms, they couldn't produce any tinder. It was simply beyond their strength as girls. "Here, you can start a fire with this," Ethan Blackwood said, handing them the bow. "How do you start a fire with a bow?" Both girls were dumbfounded. Ethan Blackwood found a piece of yucca wood, carved a groove in it with his knife, then looped the bowstring around a wooden stick, and placed one end of the stick against the groove. "Hold the top of the wooden stick with your hand and pull the bowstring," Ethan Blackwood instructed. Isabel Hawthorne placed her small hand on the wooden stick, and Sophia Ashbourne began to draw the bow. Wow, it's starting to smoke. With a gentle pull of the bowstring, the wooden stick spun more than 10 times, much faster than Ethan Blackwood's hand-twisting method. After only 3 pulls, smoke began to appear. After more than 10 pulls, black tinder was produced. When placed on dry grass, flames immediately erupted. "I never thought starting a fire could be so easy with this method." Sophia Ashbourne felt a sense of accomplishment. The feeling of lighting a fire herself was truly indescribable. "Sophia, find some smooth stones and throw them into the fire to heat them up." On the other side, Ethan Blackwood called out while processing the goat. After skinning and setting aside the hide, Ethan Blackwood sadly buried the goat's organs and head. These could have been used to make a bowl of awful soup, but now, without a pot or water, if they weren't processed quickly, they might attract wild beasts. He first removed all 4 legs, and then cut the remaining goat meat into strips. He cut a long, thin piece of wood and propped it between 2 trees, using huanghuali wood. He tied the goat meat and legs and began to smoke them over the fire. The weather here was hot, and without smoking, the meat would start to spoil within hours. Moreover, smoking was just the first step. "The stones are hot," Sophia Ashbourne called out. Upon hearing this, Ethan Blackwood dug a pit in the ground, threw the heated stones into it, covered them with banana leaves, then placed the smoked goat meat on top. He then covered the goat meat with another layer of banana leaves, wrapped it, and finally filled the pit with soil. This is a simplified underground oven. The meat will marinate in the oven for an hour and can be preserved for a week in hot environments. "This leg of lamb is our lunch," Ethan Blackwood said, cutting the lamb leg with his knife, and the 3 of them feasted heartily. "Ethan Blackwood, look, there's water over there." Isabel Hawthorne, her mouth greasy from eating, suddenly pointed to a waterhole with bright eyes and said, "This is stagnant water. It's not drinkable. It contains a large amount of bacteria and animal feces. Just 1 sip will make you vomit and have diarrhea." Ethan Blackwood had noticed the waterhole when he arrived and immediately knew it was undrinkable. "But there are no water vines here, and the pine needles are dry, and we don't know when it will rain. Will we die of thirst?" Although the lamb leg had filled their stomachs, the lack of water was more critical. Isabel Hawthorne grabbed a handful of pine needles, but chewing them felt like eating grass, with no moisture at all. Eating pine needles now won't help with hydration. The temperature is too high at noon, and the moisture in the pine needles has already evaporated. "See those wild goats? Let's follow them and we'll find a water source." Not only do humans need to replenish water, but animals do too. Following animals in the wild usually leads to clean, clear water sources. As the wild goats finished grazing, they indeed began to move away. Ethan Blackwood and the 2 girls immediately followed. Walking through dense forests, they heard the sound of a clear spring flowing not far away. All 3 were very excited. Just hearing the sound gave them infinite hope. Listen, besides the sound of the spring, I think I hear animal howls. And human voices, too. Could someone be fighting beasts? Ethan Blackwood immediately became vigilant, crouched down, holding his knife, and slowly moved towards the bushes. He lifted a small gap in the bushes and looked towards the spring. Indeed, as he had heard, a woman was at the spring, fighting a pack of wolves with a spear. The woman had beautiful features, with natural tribal paint symbols on her pretty face. She was agile and wore clothes woven from plants. Her wheat-colored skin had numerous wounds, adding to a wild beauty. However, her situation was not good. With only one person and one spear, she was facing a pack of 8 wolves. The 8 wolves had surrounded her, and several of them were also injured. The situation was at a stalemate. Wolf packs possess high hunting intelligence. Because their size is relatively small among carnivores, they understand how to obtain prey with the least effort. They usually attack solitary prey, wearing them down first, and finally killing and consuming them when the prey can no longer resist. This is a native of the island. She's in great danger now. Should we help her? Sophia Ashbourne asked. From the current situation, it was clear that the woman was at a disadvantage. Although her expression was determined and she grit her teeth to hold on, it was evident that she was at the end of her rope. Ethan Blackwood hesitated internally. If he intervened, it would be a gamble that she wouldn't be hostile. If the native harbored strong hostility towards outsiders, then even saving her would be dangerous. But if her attitude was friendly, then they would be incredibly lucky. Being able to befriend a native on the island meant they could safely await rescue. Just then, the native woman cried out in pain, her arm bitten by a wild wolf. The wolf pack had sensed her weakening and were preparing for the final attack. I'll take the chance. As fast as lightning, Ethan Blackwood drew his bow and nocked an arrow. The arrow whistled through the air, instantly piercing the wolf's skull. The other wolves were startled and immediately abandoned their attack, forming a new formation, their gazes fixed on the direction from which the arrow came, ready to defend themselves. Chapter 13. Sophia Ashbourne's Shock. Ethan Blackwood continued to draw his bow and nock arrows, shooting at the wolves. However, arrows were scarce, and not every shot was accurate, gradually reducing the threat to the wolf pack. The wolf pack was very intelligent. Seeing that Ethan Blackwood had stopped shooting, they immediately resumed their attack on the native woman. However, one wolf remained fixed on Ethan Blackwood's position, wary of his actions. You two stay here, Ethan Blackwood said sternly. Then, drawing his military knife, he charged towards the wolf pack instead of retreating. Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne watched with hearts in their mouths. Although one wolf had already been killed, there were still 7 left. Could Ethan Blackwood, combined with an exhausted native woman, stand against the wolf pack? Roar! The wolf that was focused on Ethan Blackwood let out a howl upon seeing him make a move, calling out to its companions while slowly retreating. This was the hunting wisdom of wolves. Without knowing the enemy's strength, they wouldn't engage in a head-on fight. However, Ethan Blackwood accelerated his pace, instantly reaching the wolf and, before it could retreat further, struck it directly on the head. Swish! With a splash of blood, the wolf was killed with a single blow by Ethan Blackwood. If it had fled at full speed, Ethan Blackwood would have been unable to catch it. But the wolves were here, and its objective was to regroup with its pack before attacking Ethan Blackwood, hence it didn't retreat at full speed. Little did it know, the power of Ethan Blackwood's strike was terrifying. This was the most perfect knife in terms of mechanics. Its power even a wild wolf couldn't withstand. Of course, because wolves were relatively weaker than other wild beasts. Wolves were just enhanced dogs. If it were a one-on-one fight, they might not necessarily defeat an armed adult. Ethan Blackwood knew that to win this battle, The most important thing was to reduce the number of wolves in the shortest possible time. If they were locked in a stalemate without reducing the wolf pack numbers, they would perish here. Seeing 2 of their companions lost, the remaining 6 wolves had blood-red eyes. They once again surrounded the native woman and Ethan Blackwood. The native woman said something, which Ethan Blackwood couldn't understand. He stood back to back with her, his expression solemn, holding his weapon and staring intently at the wolf pack, fully prepared for a bloody battle. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Just then, several stones, the size of eggs, flew from the jungle and struck the wolf pack. Ayo, ayo. The wolf pack immediately began to howl, glaring unwillingly at Ethan Blackwood, and quickly retreated, soon disappearing into the mountains. Ethan Blackwood breathed a sigh of relief and gave a thumbs up to the jungle. This time, the 2 girls had played a significant role in repelling the wolf pack. They weren't afraid of being hit by stones, but rather, they didn't know if Ethan Blackwood had more helpers. That's why they retreated with reluctance. But just as the wolf crisis was resolved, Ethan Blackwood suddenly saw a glint of cold light. Immediately after, he chillingly realized that the spearhead was pointed directly at his throat, just a little further, and it would pierce his neck. Danger. Ethan Blackwood's heart turned cold. It seemed he had lost the gamble. It appeared that this native woman harbored strong hostility towards outsiders, to the point of attacking him immediately after he had saved her. Silim, Silim. Just as Ethan Blackwood was filled with anxiety, he heard Sophia Ashbourne shout an unintelligible word and run over quickly. Immediately, the native woman was startled, looking at Sophia Ashbourne with great astonishment in her eyes. After a long hesitation, she glared fiercely at Ethan Blackwood, put away her spear, and prepared to leave. But then her legs gave way, and she collapsed to the ground unconscious. Clearly, the battle had severely wounded her. Sophia Ashbourne rushed forward to check her injuries. "Can you communicate with her?" Ethan Blackwood was surprised. However, Sophia Ashbourne's shock at this moment was no less than Ethan Blackwood's. Silim means greeting in Sumerian. Could she possibly be a descendant of the Sumerians? This is impossible. The Sumerian civilization has long since vanished into the river of history. However, the tattoo on her back is of the Sumerian chief god, Anu the sky god. Sophia Ashbourne's pretty face was filled with shock as she murmured to herself. Ethan Blackwood was completely bewildered, not understanding what she was saying at all. Isabel Hawthorne walked over and whispered, "Sister Sophia has been obsessed with ancient civilizations since childhood, which is why she majored in rare languages. That native woman from earlier is definitely related to ancient civilizations. We don't understand it. Let's quickly replenish our water." Ethan Blackwood filled his water bottle, feeling a bit heavy. Judging by the native woman's attitude towards him, her entire tribe would likely have the same attitude, which would put them in a very unfavorable position. On this deserted island, dealing with Guan Sheng and Lucas, Everhart was something Ethan Blackwood could handle with ease. But facing the natives without firearms would be quite dangerous. Go and get the smoked meat, find a cave to rest for a while, and then we'll head back to the beach. The native woman had an unfriendly attitude, so Ethan Blackwood decided not to linger in the jungle. "What about Guan Sheng and Lucas Everhart?" Isabel Hawthorne asked, a little scared. "No matter. They now have less than 10 people left, and their water and food sources are far inferior to ours. As long as we don't engage in direct conflict, we can outlast them," Ethan Blackwood stated confidently. Ethan Blackwood had originally planned to explore the jungle gradually, but Guan Sheng and his group's pursuit had forced Ethan Blackwood to venture this deep. From a safety perspective, the beach was far better than the jungle. "Ethan Blackwood, about that, can we save her first?" Sophia Ashbourne pursed her lips. "She has many wounds. If left untreated and she loses too much blood, she will die." "If it were just a native," she might not have had such great sympathy. The main reason was the native woman's identity, which made Sophia Ashbourne very curious. Ethan Blackwood weighed the options, seeing Sophia Ashbourne's persistent gaze. He sighed and nodded. "Thank you, I'll find some red aloe. And don't use your clothes as bandages. Use mine," Sophia Ashbourne said excitedly upon seeing Ethan Blackwood agree. "Red aloe leaves can only treat scratches like yours. She was bitten. So there are more bacteria and viruses. Aloe juice might not be very effective," Ethan Blackwood said as he began searching nearby. This time, the search took much longer. Just when Sophia Ashbourne was losing hope, Ethan Blackwood ran back. "I found something life-saving. Follow me." Ethan Blackwood then carried the native woman on his back, bringing Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne to a towering tree in the forest. This tree is called Sangar de Drago. It has heart-shaped leaves. And its sap not only accelerates wound healing, but also promotes blood clotting and has strong antibacterial properties. It's known as dragon's blood, Ethan Blackwood introduced, then directly chopped into the trunk with his knife. Instantly, bright red sap flowed from the cut, shocking both girls. The sap will lose its effectiveness if exposed to the air for too long. It must be applied to the wounds as quickly as possible, Ethan Blackwood said, about to act, showing great enthusiasm. But Sophia Ashbourne grabbed his ear. "Turn around. Gia and I will do it." "Ouch, Miss Lynn, stop it. She's just a wild native. She won't mind me applying medicine to her wounds." "I do mind." Sophia Ashbourne pulled harder. Her face flushed with anger. Ethan Blackwood had no choice but to turn around. The bright red sap was applied to the wounds. After rubbing by hand, it turned white like soap. The wounds immediately stopped bleeding upon contact with the sap. Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne quickly applied it to all the native woman's wounds. When they were about to bandage them, they hesitated. "There are so many wounds, it will take a lot of cloth. Sister Sophia, do you have enough fabric on your clothes?" Isabel Hawthorne asked, glancing at Sophia Ashbourne. This was precisely what Sophia Ashbourne was struggling with. "Ethan Blackwood's you." "What about me? I only know that you said earlier you'd use your clothes as bandages," Ethan Blackwood said calmly. His back turned. "HMPH, you've got me there." Sophia Ashbourne stomped her foot huffily. She was wearing a floral dress. After several days of travel, although it was torn in some places, it was still sufficient for bandages. Sophia Ashbourne began to cut her dress with a knife from the hem of her skirt. Each time a wound was bandaged, a substantial amount of fabric was used. As more and more wounds were bandaged, Sophia Ashbourne's face turned redder and redder. By the time all the native woman's wounds were bandaged, Sophia Ashbourne's floral long skirt had turned into a floral super short skirt. Even the sleeves had been cut off, turning it into a vest. "Wow, Sister Sophia, you're dressed so revealingly." "HMPH, stupid Gia, shut up. Ethan Blackwood if you keep looking. I'll poke your eyeballs out." Sophia Ashbourne's fair complexion was now like a boiling teapot, just short of steaming. Chapter 14, I Won't Let You Escape. Ethan Blackwood chuckled sheepishly and averted his gaze. He couldn't help it. Sophia Ashbourne's face was a disaster waiting to happen, let alone her current attire. It was normal for a spirited young man like Ethan Blackwood to be attracted. Ahem. Just then, the native woman on the ground suddenly coughed twice and opened her eyes. Upon seeing Ethan Blackwood and the two girls around her, she was startled. She reached for her weapon but found her spear was not nearby. She instinctively sat up, retreated several steps, and watched the three of them warily. "Jaili Gwala." Sophia Ashbourne, however, spoke with a kind expression, uttering words that Ethan Blackwood and Isabel Hawthorne completely failed to understand. After hearing Sophia Ashbourne speak, the native woman's expression became less tense but remained silent. Finally, She uttered a simple word and turned away, disappearing from their sight. "Sister Sophia, what did you say?" Isabel Hawthorne asked, like a curious baby. I asked her about the Sumerian civilization, but she didn't say anything. However, she did tell me her name, Shazdra. Although the information obtained was limited, Sophia Ashbourne was very excited. The lamb meat that had been marinated earlier was ready. They took it out, wrapped it in banana leaves, tied it securely, and it could be preserved for several days. Returning along the same path, before leaving the jungle, Ethan Blackwood and the two girls quietly glanced at the plain below the cliff and saw that Guan Sheng and his group had indeed all come down. It seemed that after half a day of trying, they had finally found the Higger dragon vine. However, these people led by Guan Sheng now had extremely low morale, and their faces all looked numb from dehydration and hunger. During the pursuit, they not only faced more dangers, but also had much less food and water than Ethan Blackwood and his companions. Especially Guan Sheng and Lucas Everhart, their hearts filled with endless hatred. Were like barrels of air with nowhere to vent. The suppressed emotions festered, causing them mental distress. "They're blocking the way. How do we get up?" Sophia Ashbourne frowned. Ethan Blackwood, however, flashed a mischievous smile, cleared his throat, and disguised his voice. "Brother Sheng, there seems to be a water hole in the jungle to the left." Guan Sheng, in his dazed state, couldn't discern Ethan Blackwood's disguised voice at all, without questioning which subordinate had spoken. He waved his hand and led his group towards the water hole. "Heh, the water in that water hole is all stagnant water." Isabel Hawthorne grinned and clapped her hands. "They're gone. Shall we go up now?" Sophia Ashbourne asked. "It's blazing hot now. Let's find a cool cave to rest first." Ethan Blackwood's suggestion was immediately agreed upon by both girls. There were many caves in the rock face, and both Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne wanted to peek into each one. "Let's find a deeper one. It'll be cooler." "If you think that, so do wild beasts. Deeper caves are usually animal dens." Ethan Blackwood's words made Isabel Hawthorne shiver. In the end, the three found a relatively shallow cave, but one that could still block the sun and conceal their forms. From leaving their beds in the middle of the night to traveling until now, Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne, the two girls, were utterly exhausted from sleep. Once they sat down in a cool place, almost instinctively, they leaned on Ethan Blackwood's shoulders and fell asleep. Ethan Blackwood was also very tired, but dared not sleep too deeply, fearing sudden emergencies. He could only close his eyes and rest, maintaining a false sleep while tightly gripping his knife. As time passed, there was a commotion outside the cave. Ethan Blackwood's eyes immediately opened, his mind alert. After a period of false sleep, he had fully recovered his energy. Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne, woken up, rubbed their sleepy eyes. "It's Guan Sheng and Lucas Everhart. Hide," Ethan Blackwood said, taking the lead and hiding behind a narrow rock. Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne quickly followed suit, but then they encountered an awkward situation. Since the cave was not deep, the rock wall inside was very narrow. If they wanted to avoid being seen by outsiders, the three of them had to squeeze together. Especially since Ethan Blackwood was in the middle when they slept on the ground. Now, squeezed together. Ethan Blackwood was still in the middle, sandwiched between them. Ethan Blackwood hadn't expected such good fortune. "I'll kill you. SHH, if you attract attention, I won't bother with you anymore." Ethan Blackwood whispered to Sophia Ashbourne, whose pretty face was beaded with sweat. "Sister Sophia, be quiet." "You scoundrel, Ethan Blackwood. You traitor, Gia. I'll deal with both of you later." Sophia Ashbourne bared her canine teeth and threatened in a voice so low it was barely audible. At this moment, outside the cave, Guan Sheng and his group were all pale-faced, sweating profusely. "Brother Sheng, I've vomited my bile. I can't hold it anymore. I have to go again. Vomiting and diarrhea. I'm dehydrated. I'm going to die. Everyone was continuously vomiting and having diarrhea. The entire plane was now filled with a foul odor. Damn it! Who the hell said the water in The Chinese letter, Tan Shui Pool Tarn? Outside the jungle was drinkable. Lucas Everhart. Was it you? Guan Sheng, on the verge of collapse from diarrhea, roared furiously. When they saw the full water hole, everyone was excited, but shortly after drinking their fill, abnormal symptoms began to appear. They couldn't stop vomiting and having diarrhea. Brother Sheng, no, it wasn't me. Lucas Everhart could barely stand, his face extremely pale. My subordinates from the martial arts club have never been here before. Besides you, who else could it be? Guan Sheng directly slapped Lucas Everhart. Gag. Lucas Everhart, already extremely weak, was directly slapped and vomited, spraying Guan Sheng's face. What the hell, you dare talk back, disgusting. Guan Sheng cursed and kicked Lucas Everhart in the stomach. Vd. Lucas Everhart clutched his stomach and fell to the ground, directly having diarrhea from the kick. Even the sloppiest beggar would be 100 times better off than him now. Brother Sheng. It's too hot. Let's find a cave to rest. This cave is cooler. A subordinate pointed to a cave and said. Guan Sheng nodded and led his group of subordinates into the cave. Lucas Everhart, lying on the ground, quickly got up and followed. He had no choice now. Without Guan Sheng, he might not survive a single day on his own. Even though he felt extremely wronged, he could only follow Guan Sheng diligently. Snore, snort. Mom. It's a wild boar. However, not long after Guan Sheng and his group entered, a massive beast suddenly rushed out. Any wild beast has territorial awareness. Once its territory is invaded, it will be completely enraged. Immediately. The entire group was chased by the wild boar, scrambling for their lives. Normally, 10 skilled individuals would have a chance to fight a wild boar to a draw. But now, Guan Sheng and the others were not only tired and hungry, but also all suffering from vomiting and diarrhea, their combat effectiveness less than 10% of their peak. Ethan Blackwood. How about we rush out now and finish them off? Isabel Hawthorne asked, waving her small fists, hoping for a swift victory. Hey, finishing them off. And then what? You deal with the wild boar, Ethan Blackwood said speechlessly. Ethan Blackwood had stopped caring about Guan Sheng and Lucas Everhart long ago. Especially now, they were just a disorganized mob, if it were only them. They posed no threat. The real danger, however, was these wild beasts. Wild boars were nothing compared to wild wolves. The wolf pack they encountered earlier was no match for this single wild boar. The current predicament of Guan Sheng and the others was the best proof. 2 severely ill and extremely weak individuals had already been gored to death by the wild boar. The remaining 8 people had fled into the jungle under the pursuit of the wild boar. With their condition, even if they hadn't encountered a wild boar, they would have sustained casualties. Given the current situation, I estimate at least half of them will die. Ethan Blackwood estimated indifferently. Sickness, dehydration, and the wild boar attack. This combination would be tough for Guan Sheng and his group. You scoundrel, Ethan Blackwood. Can you let go now? Sophia Ashbourne gritted her teeth. Ethan Blackwood coughed awkwardly and quickly released his arms that were holding her. Sophia Ashbourne darted out like a startled rabbit, about to attack Ethan Blackwood. Hey. Miss Lynn, be careful. If I get injured, I won't be able to climb the cliff, Ethan Blackwood said quickly, seeing Sophia Ashbourne about to use her waist-pinching technique again. Sophia Ashbourne stopped, glared at Ethan Blackwood huffily, and reluctantly gave up, but her heart was filled with concern. A 50-meter high cliff, it was difficult enough to get down, let alone climb up barefoot. This was without any safety measures. One wrong step, and they would fall to their deaths at the bottom of the valley. Chapter 15. Solved 3 more. Ethan Blackwood arrived at the bottom of the cliff and looked up. Climbing a 50-meter high cliff would indeed be very difficult. But Ethan Blackwood's physical strength was ample, and he had already chosen his route. Now, all he had to do was climb up along the original path. He cut a small section of higger dragon vine, tied it around his waist, and the other end to the handle of his knife. This served as a small insurance policy. If something unexpected happened and he couldn't find a handhold, he could stab the military knife into a crevice in the rock face. Taking a deep breath, Ethan Blackwood prepared to climb. Ethan Blackwood, come quickly. Isn't this the vine they used to come down? At this moment, Sophia Ashbourne exclaimed in surprise. In a shaded spot, a vine was hanging vertically from the cliff. Ethan Blackwood smiled upon seeing it. This was the higger dragon vine. Clearly, Guan Sheng and his group had found it, and they were able to descend using this vine. He hadn't expected it to benefit him. He immediately tied the vine around his waist. With speed and stability, Ethan Blackwood pushed off with his legs and pulled with his hands, his body ascending a considerable distance. Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne were only worried for 3 minutes before Ethan Blackwood had already climbed to the top of the cliff. Next, Sophia Ashbourne caught the vine Ethan Blackwood lowered, wrapped it around her waist a few times. With Ethan Blackwood pulling, her ascent was even faster than Ethan Blackwood's. Both of them reached the top of the cliff, leaving only Isabel Hawthorne below. But just as Isabel Hawthorne was about to ascend, she suddenly heard rustling footsteps behind her. Brother Sheng, Jia is over there. Damn it, finally caught a little lass. Immediately after, Lucas Everhart's and Guan Sheng's voices were heard from behind. Isabel Hawthorne turned around in terror, seeing Guan Sheng and 5 other men, all covered in blood and dirt, approaching her with ferocious expressions. Her small face turned pale, and she retreated backward. Jia, hurry and tie the vine. Sophia Ashbourne on the cliff cried out anxiously, tears in her voice. Ethan Blackwood frowned, threw his military knife to Sophia Ashbourne, and said sternly, Sophia, quickly go cut some cattail grass. I need the stems. Sophia Ashbourne understood, although she was very worried about Isabel Hawthorne. She had to leave the edge of the cliff and quickly start cutting cattail grass to make arrows. At the bottom of the valley, Isabel Hawthorne's hands trembled in fear as she fumbled with tying the vine, before she could even secure it properly. Her hair was suddenly tugged violently. You little slut, still trying to go up. Ha ha ha, today I'll make you wish you were dead. Lucas Everhart was the first to strike, grabbing Isabel Hawthorne's hair and menacingly saying, He, who had always been a pampered young master, had undergone earth-shattering changes in these short few days. The culprit was Ethan Blackwood and the 2 women. Now, he wanted to retaliate fiercely, even if he was treated like a dog by Guan Sheng. He would make Ethan Blackwood and the 2 girls pay the price. Let go of me. Isabel Hawthorne was so scared that her eyes turned red. Seeing Guan Sheng also approaching, her small body trembled even more. Hey, little lass. Your fate today will be Sophia Ashbourne's tomorrow. I'll collect some interest from you first. Lucas Everhart said coldly, and was about to lay hands on Isabel Hawthorne. Whoosh. But at this moment, with a whistling sound through the whistling air, an arrow flew through the air and instantly shot towards Lucas Everhart. As fate would have it, this arrow directly pierced Lucas Everhart's lower abdomen. Ayo, ayo, ayo. Suddenly, Lucas Everhart's frantic screams echoed through the valley. Even the wild beasts in the jungle were stunned by the horrific screams. From the sound alone, one could feel how much pain Lucas Everhart was enduring at this moment. Jia, hurry and pull the vine, Sophia Ashbourne shouted with all her might. Isabel Hawthorne used her last ounce of strength to tie the vine. At this moment, Guan Sheng, his eyes bloodshot, lunged forward. But in the next second, Ethan Blackwood seized the opportunity, and he and Sophia Ashbourne pulled with all their might, instantly pulling Isabel Hawthorne up several meters. Guan Sheng lunged forward and smashed directly into the rock face, his head instantly bleeding. Looking up, Isabel Hawthorne had already ascended more than 10 meters. Clearly, it was impossible to catch her. The duck that had flown into his mouth once again flew away. Guan Sheng was so enraged that blood began to surge backward throughout his body. "Grass, useless. You useless piece of trash. You can't even stop a woman." Guan Sheng didn't care about Lucas Everhart's current predicament and rained blows upon him to vent his anger. "Smash you piece of scum to death." Bang. But at this moment, Guan Sheng suddenly felt a pain in his head. He reached up to touch it and found his palm covered in crimson. Clearly, he had been hit by a stone and was bleeding. The Isabel Hawthorne who was being pulled up was continuously picking up stones from the rock face, her eyes red, and smashing them downwards. The higher her position, the greater the impact force of the stones she threw. At a height of nearly 50 meters, even throwing a small object could be fatal. Immediately, Guan Sheng and the others scrambled to escape the bottom of the valley. Although they were extremely unwilling, they dared not linger at the bottom of the cliff. If they were hit in the head by a stone, the consequence would be death. After Isabel Hawthorne was pulled to the top of the cliff, she immediately threw herself into their arms and cried loudly. "I was so scared. That scoundrel pulled my hair, it hurt so much, woohoo." "It's okay. It's okay." Sophia Ashbourne comforted her with great affection. After a long time, Isabel Hawthorne recovered, her small shoulders still trembling as she sobbed. "Do you want to get revenge on them? Follow me and let's hide," Ethan Blackwood said, throwing the Higger dragon vine directly down the cliff, and then hiding with the two girls. After a long time, there was no movement. It wasn't until 2 hours later that they saw the vine hanging on the rock face finally begin to sway. Obviously, the other party had started climbing up using the vine. Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne held their breath, their eyes fixed on the vine. "Heavy." Finally couldn't help it. Ethan Blackwood sneered. There had been no sound from the cliff for 2 hours. Guan Sheng and the others must have thought they had already left. However, given his personality, the first to climb up would likely be his subordinates. As Ethan Blackwood had expected, Guan Sheng's subordinate climbed up first, wiping the sweat from his brow as if he had survived a great disaster. He looked around and found no one. He shouted down, "Brother Sheng, it's safe." After finishing speaking, he began to pull on the vine. Ethan Blackwood tightly gripped his military knife, preparing to strike. But the next person pulled up was another subordinate. Guan Sheng now had only 3 subordinates and Lucas Everhart, totaling only 5 people. The 2 subordinates who had climbed up began to pull together. Ethan Blackwood had made up his mind that before the person they were pulling up had fully ascended, he would make his move. If too many of them ascended at once, it could lead to trouble. After all, Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne lacked practical combat experience. If they fell into enemy hands, they would become Ethan Blackwood's burden. As Ethan Blackwood moved with the agility of a leaping rabbit, halfway through the other 2 individuals pulling, he instantly rushed behind them and kicked out with both feet. With 2 terrified screams, the 2 immediately fell off the cliff. Ethan Blackwood ignored these 2 and quickly looked at the vine, only to be greatly disappointed. Hanging on the vine was still Guan Sheng's subordinate. Perhaps due to suffering too many losses at Ethan Blackwood's hands, Guan Sheng had become increasingly cautious. This caution had temporarily saved his life. Ethan Blackwood completely ignored the pleas of the person on the vine, leveled his saber, and cut the vine. With a bang, the screams instantly fell silent. Guan Sheng at the bottom of the valley flinched wildly. His teeth clenched, and his eyes bled. In just a few days, nearly 20 of his subordinates had been lost. Now, he was a lone commander, with a crippled eunuch for company. Overwhelmed by anger, he finally couldn't hold it in and spat out a mouthful of blood. Just then, the sky began to darken, and thunder rumbled from the sky. "We'll stay here for the night. We'll return to the beach tomorrow morning. Quickly collect dry grass," Ethan Blackwood decided decisively. Whoosh, whoosh. However, the tropical rainforest storms were unforgiving. Before Ethan Blackwood finished speaking, the downpour arrived. Instantly, the three were drenched like drowned rats. "You two take shelter under the trees. I'll set up a shelter," Ethan Blackwood said to the two girls, taking off his jacket and covering Sophia Ashbourne, then rushed into the jungle. In the pouring rain, Ethan Blackwood could only build a simple shelter. He cut down a log and propped it between two stones, then laid short logs across them, covered with several layers of banana leaves, and the shelter was complete. In the forest, a single slope shelter was sufficient. Since the wind didn't blow in, the rain fell vertically, unlike on the beach where a triangular roof was needed. Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne huddled together in the shelter, shivered like two little quails from the cold. Especially Sophia Ashbourne, whose clothes had all been used as bandages. Her complexion turned ashen from the cold. "Wait for me. I'll go find something to start a fire." Ethan Blackwood took off his jacket, covered Sophia Ashbourne with it, and dashed into the jungle, braving the downpour. Chapter 16, Back to the Beach. Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne were very worried. Dark clouds were gathering, and with such heavy rain and the late hour, entering the jungle would be very dangerous. Moreover, in this environment, without Ethan Blackwood by their side, they felt a profound lack of security. In this trio, Ethan Blackwood had clearly become the absolute anchor. Fortunately, Ethan Blackwood returned not long after. He appeared elated, holding two small, brown wooden shells. Upon arriving at the shelter and opening the shells, they revealed snow-white, dry cotton. "These are hibiscus tree shells," Ethan explained. "The cotton inside can be used as tinder. The outer shell protected it from the rain." He then took out the cotton and began to start a fire using a bowstring. Because the wood for fire starting was also damp, it took nearly 10 minutes to get a fire going, even with the bowstring. Otherwise, it would have been impossible. The firewood, due to its moisture content, emitted white smoke before burning, which kept the flames from growing too large. Nevertheless, Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne were already very content. Amidst the fierce wind and rain, lightning and thunder, the two girls huddled together. Shivering, thunder alone already frightened them, let alone being in the jungle at night. What if wild beasts appear? Isabel Hawthorne's eyes darted around nervously, making Sophia Ashbourne uneasy as well. "Don't worry. Wild beasts don't move around in the rain. As long as we don't wander off, we'll be safe." Ethan Blackwood's words reassured the two girls. However, even without beasts, the night's torrential rain caused the temperature to drop sharply. Ethan Blackwood sat by the bonfire wearing only a tank top and felt chilled to the bone. Just then, he felt a warmth beside him. Slightly startled, he saw Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne snuggled up to him. "We're afraid you'll freeze to death. Don't think too much into it," Sophia Ashbourne said, turning her pretty face away proudly. If you die. We won't have your thigh to hug," Isabel Hawthorne added cheerfully, without any psychological burden, although neither girl had consciously realized it yet, deep down. They had developed a strong sense of dependence on Ethan Blackwood. In the rain-soaked jungle, beside the flickering bonfire, the three huddled together for warmth. The next morning, the rain finally stopped, but the sky remained overcast. "Which way should we go to get back to the beach?" Sophia Ashbourne looked around at the bewildering array of vegetation, unable to discern their direction. "With no sun. We can't see the North Star either." Ethan Blackwood, What do we do? Their previous methods of navigation relied on the sun or stars. Now, with the overcast sky and no immediate sign of the sun appearing, they couldn't use their old methods to find their way. This will do. Ethan Blackwood's eyes lit up. He picked up a piece of wire from the ground and began rubbing it on his hair. Is your head itchy? Isabel Hawthorne tilted her head. Looking puzzled, Sophia Ashbourne remained silent, simply watching. After rubbing the wire for a while, Ethan Blackwood picked up a leaf and placed it in a small puddle on the ground. He then placed the wire on the floating leaf. What happened next was astonishing. Without any wind, the leaf carrying the wire began to rotate on its own. It stopped after turning half a circle. Ethan Blackwood pointed to where the wire was facing and indicated its final resting position. This is north. If we head in this direction, we can get back to the beach. Sophia Ashbourne's beautiful eyes widened. What's the principle behind this now? She wondered. Shocked, but also quite annoyed by the feeling of not understanding and having to seek Ethan Blackwood's guidance. Friction from rubbing the wire on my hair magnetizes it. When suspended, magnetized metal always points towards magnetic north. This wire is now a compass, with its ends pointing south and north. With that, Ethan Blackwood led the way in the direction indicated by the wire. Wow. I don't understand what you're saying, but it sounds amazing. Isabel Hawthorne's eyes sparkled. HMPH, you're showing off again, Sophia Ashbourne pouted, intensely curious about how much more knowledge Ethan Blackwood's wilderness survival guide contained. Due to the night's rain, the ground was very muddy. Ethan Blackwood walked at the front, clearing the path by tapping and clearing with a wooden stick. I need to go take care of some business, Isabel Hawthorne announced, having drunk a lot of water during the rain, and signaled to the other two. Ethan Blackwood and Sophia Ashbourne stopped, waiting. However, not long after, a scream from Isabel Hawthorne pierced the air. Ah, a snake! There's a snake! Isabel Hawthorne fell to the ground in fright. At her feet, a red and black snake was repeatedly flicking its tongue at her. Isabel Hawthorne scrambled backward, her face pale with fear. As the snake drew closer, she couldn't suppress a shudder. Sophia Ashbourne was also terrified and looked to Ethan Blackwood for help. It's all right, this snake is not poisonous. Ethan Blackwood glanced at it and, reassured, walked over and drove the snake away with a stick. There's a saying, red and yellow, fear of death, red and black, good friend. If a snake has red and yellow patterns, it's highly venomous. Red and black ones are harmless. All right. You can go now, Ethan Blackwood explained. I don't need to any more HMPH. Isabel Hawthorne got up and stomped her foot shyly. Well, the fright had done its business for her. She looked like she wanted to cry, complaining how she was already dirty from the journey these past few days, and now, without any spare clothes, it was just adding insult to injury. Besides, this was embarrassing, wasn't it? It was one thing to have Sophia Ashbourne around, but a grown man, Ethan Blackwood, was also present. Isabel Hawthorne instinctively tried to distance herself from them. However, Sophia Ashbourne grabbed Isabel Hawthorne's hand. We can just wash up when we get to the beach. Ethan Blackwood also seemed unconcerned, paying no mind to the matter and continuing to forge ahead. Isabel Hawthorne was deeply touched that even in the wilderness, he was considerate of her dignity. Her distress vanished instantly, replaced by a playful smile. From morning until afternoon, Ethan Blackwood and the two girls finally returned to the beach. Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne immediately collapsed onto the sand, lying perfectly still. After the life-or-death escapes of the past few days, lying on the beach and feeling the sea breeze was pure bliss, especially without the psychological pressure from Guan Sheng and Lucas Everhart. This sense of ease was even more comforting. Ethan Blackwood inspected the shelter they had previously built and found no issues. Even after such heavy rain, it remained quite dry inside. At that moment, the dark clouds in the sky gathered again. Thunder rumbled. Sophia, Isabel, quickly go gather more clam shells and coconut husks. Ethan Blackwood instructed immediately. Despite the fact that Ethan Blackwood and the two girls had eaten rabbit meat and wild goat in the past few days, food and water were constantly scarce on the island, far from a state of complacency. The wild goat they hunted yesterday would only last them one more day. As for fresh water, only about half a flask remained with Ethan Blackwood. If they didn't find ways to collect fresh water and search for food, their lives would soon be in danger. The torrential rain began again, outside the triangular roof. More than 20 clamshells were placed, and the number continued to increase. The two girls only stopped after collecting all the clamshells they could find on the beach. In addition to clamshells, they also gathered old coconut tree bark. They placed the bark under a stone, connecting a concave section of a banana leaf to the stone, so that rainwater would flow down the banana leaf into the concave bark. Ethan Blackwood, meanwhile, busied himself cutting bamboo sections, each with a small hole, ready to collect rainwater. Ethan Blackwood, "You're not allowed to come over here. Isabel and I are going to bathe over there." Sophia Ashbourne found a spot with a tall rock formation that had a long groove. Rainwater collected in the groove and flowed down like a faucet. After several days without bathing, the two women thoroughly washed themselves and their clothes. Ethan Blackwood, being a man of integrity, didn't even steal a glance. He was busy cutting bamboo, in the face of survival. Everything else paled in comparison. Ethan Blackwood knew the priorities. Before the sun came out, Ethan Blackwood had made over 30 bamboo tubes. Just then, the sky cleared. Tropical weather, once it clears, immediately causes temperatures to rise sharply. Ethan Blackwood felt immense pressure. If he didn't collect the rainwater into the bamboo tubes quickly, it would soon evaporate. However, the holes he had carved into the bamboo tubes were very small. If they were too large, the water inside would also evaporate, defeating the purpose. "Sophia, Isabel, hurry and come help," Ethan Blackwood called out immediately. Chapter 17. Sophia Ashbourne swept away by a wave. Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne, having put on their clean clothes, found Ethan Blackwood momentarily lost in thought. Bathed in the warm sunlight and sea breeze, their youthful aura was captivating. "Still staring," Sophia Ashbourne said, her pretty face flushing, and glared at Ethan Blackwood. Ethan Blackwood snapped back to reality, chuckled sheepishly, and picked 2 beautiful trumpet flowers. "Wow, Sophia, he's going to give you flowers, how romantic," Isabel Hawthorne whispered. "You silly Isabel. Don't talk nonsense." Sophia Ashbourne's face turned red, and she felt a flutter of anxiety. Ethan Blackwood. Why was he suddenly giving flowers? Wasn't that too straightforward? Should she accept or refuse? Would accepting his flowers make her seem too frivolous? Moreover, that arrogant guy would surely think she was easily swayed by his affections. But if she refused, would he be hurt? Just as Sophia Ashbourne's heart was racing, Ethan Blackwood walked up to her. To Sophia Ashbourne's astonishment, Ethan Blackwood broke off the petals and threw them on the ground, handing her the stem. "The root of the trumpet flower can be used as a straw. Quickly use this to store the rainwater in the bamboo tubes," Ethan Blackwood said as he handed each of the girls a straw. "HMPH, Ethan Blackwood, you big dummy." Sophia Ashbourne stomped her foot angrily and punched Ethan Blackwood on the forehead. Ethan Blackwood's head reeled, leaving him bewildered. How did he offend her? "You're really a walking, talking straight man," Isabel Hawthorne commented with a shake of her head. However, the two girls soon froze. "Ethan Blackwood, is the way to store rainwater in bamboo tubes by sucking it from clam shells with our mouths." Sophia Ashbourne's eyes widened, finding it somewhat unacceptable. Wouldn't that mean their saliva would be mixed with the water? "This is the only way." Ethan Blackwood shrugged and began collecting rainwater. Isabel Hawthorne remained carefree, with no psychological burden, and did as instructed. Only Sophia Ashbourne felt a bit shy. Wouldn't drinking the rainwater collected this way be tantamount to a kiss? However, the sun overhead grew hotter, leaving no room for lingering thoughts. Sophia Ashbourne had no choice but to use this method. The three of them worked diligently for a while, finally filling all 30-plus bamboo tubes with fresh water. Enough to last them about 3 days. At this point, Ethan Blackwood's eyes lit up, due to the rain and rising tide. Some marine debris had washed ashore. He picked up a rusted oil drum and several plastic water bottles. To ordinary people, these were just trash, but to Ethan Blackwood on the deserted island, they were treasures. Even a piece of wire could be useful, let alone so many items. Take the oil drum, for instance. Once cleaned, it could be used to boil water and cook food. After all, for the past few days, they had been drinking raw water, which was not as hygienic as boiled water. Moreover, if they had had an oil drum earlier, they could have cooked the goat offal, instead of wasting it by throwing it away. Ethan Blackwood cleaned the washed-up items and cut off the top third of the plastic water bottles with a knife. He then placed the bottle necks inward into the bottle bodies. "What are you doing?" Sophia Ashbourne asked. "Fishing traps," Ethan Blackwood replied while picking up some conch shells. He smashed the conch shells, discarding both shell and meat into the bottles, and then placed the bottles in the shallows. If small fish want to swim in to eat the conch shells, they'll be trapped inside and can't get out. Ethan Blackwood explained. Because the bottle opening was turned inward, it resembled a funnel. It was easy to get in, even if the fish was slightly larger than the opening. But it was very difficult to get out. Even very small fish might not be able to find the opening. Ethan Blackwood made these fishing traps out of the 5 washed-up plastic bottles and placed them in the shallows. Although the fish caught this way were not large, every little bit counted. Everyone wanted to eat big fish, but the previous method of poisoning fish was very unstable. Furthermore, they didn't have many Daris trifoliata leaves. Ethan Blackwood had already picked many, and only a few remained. After placing the 5 fishing traps, Ethan Blackwood split a thin bamboo pole. He tied some hibiscus tiliaceus to one end of the pole, leaving only 5 centimeters. He then split it into a cross with a knife, sharpening all 4 tips. Thus, a fish spear with 4 prongs was made. Calculating the time, there was still some time before low tide, and he could still go into the sea. Ethan Blackwood, with his handmade fish spear, immediately jumped into the seawater. When spearfishing in shallow water, it's crucial to avoid shaded areas, as moray eels often lurk there. They are highly aggressive and venomous. The water in the shallows had high visibility. After searching the seabed for a while, Ethan Blackwood spotted a large brown grouper. He became instantly excited. Groupers are very nutritious, with tender, flavorful flesh. They are low in fat but high in protein, often called sea chicken. If he could catch this one fish, his body would be greatly replenished. What Ethan Blackwood didn't expect was that this grouper was quite fierce. Seeing him holding a fish spear, it didn't retreat but instead actively attacked him. Ethan Blackwood swam with one hand and held the fish spear with the other, continuously attempting to stab the grouper. But the grouper was more agile than expected, narrowly dodging every thrust. After a few exchanges, Ethan Blackwood's lungs were running out of oxygen, forcing him to surface for air. He took a deep breath and dove back into the water. "Be careful. Don't drown," Sophia Ashbourne shouted, seeing clearly in the clear water. "Don't be afraid, Ethan Blackwood will collect your body if you drown. Go, go," Isabel Hawthorne shouted along. Ethan Blackwood, who had been full of ambition and ready to showcase his skills, choked on a mouthful of seawater from the jinks and the sharp tongues, quickly surfacing again to glare fiercely at the 2 girls. Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne immediately looked up at the sky and whistled, acting as if nothing had happened, as if their words hadn't been uttered by them. Ethan Blackwood was furious but couldn't lash out. He could only vent his anger on the grouper. The unfortunate grouper couldn't withstand Ethan Blackwood's wrath and was pierced by a spear. After catching the grouper, Ethan Blackwood checked the 5 fishing traps he had placed earlier. Each trap contained 7 or 8 small fish, about finger length. Combined, they numbered about 40. plus the grouper, a very gratifying haul. Seeing that low tide was approaching, Ethan Blackwood chose not to go further into the sea. He put the fish into the cleaned, oiled drum, added a little fresh water, and picked some tender gooseweed to cook over the fire. This plant, tender gooseweed, is rich in vitamin C and has anti-inflammatory properties, making it excellent as a side dish or for brewing tea. Just as Ethan Blackwood was cooking the fish, eagerly awaiting the meal, Isabel Hawthorne came running over in a panic. "Ethan Blackwood, Sophia Ashbourne has been swept away by the waves." Isabel Hawthorne cried out, her voice choked with tears. Ethan Blackwood's scalp tingled, without time to think. He shot off towards the sea like an arrow. The receding tide is the most dangerous time. Because of the fast-moving current, there's a strong pulling force. If one is caught in the shallow water, they can easily be swept away by the waves. "Help, cough, cough." The surging seawater tossed Sophia Ashbourne up and down. Due to the rapid current, soon only her head was visible above the water, although she knew how to swim. How could her individual strength possibly resist nature? Sophia Ashbourne was like a speck in the ocean, struggling in the water, but to no avail. The sea was like a boundless, deadly vortex, threatening to devour her. Bones and all. "Isabel, give me your jeans," Ethan Blackwood exclaimed in a frenzy, while quickly taking off his own pants and tying a dead knot with both trouser legs. The panicked Isabel Hawthorne had lost all capacity for thought and immediately did as Ethan Blackwood instructed. Ethan Blackwood tied the other pair of jeans in the same way, tying a dead knot with the trouser legs. Then, holding the waistband of the jeans, he threw them into the water. Instantly, the entire pair of jeans filled with air and bulged out like a life preserver. "Isabel, go find a longer vine and get ready to pull Sophia Ashbourne ashore," Ethan Blackwood instructed. With that, he grabbed a life preserver in each hand and swam rapidly towards Sophia Ashbourne's location. The receding tide meant it was evening, and dusk was approaching. Under the darkening sky, the dark sea surface resembled an abyss that devoured everything, opening its pitch-black eyes to gaze at Ethan Blackwood. Without immense courage and an absolute determination, no one would dare to venture into the sea at such a time. Chapter 18, Frightful Sharks. With red envelope, Ethan Blackwood covered tens of meters in less than 30 seconds. Sophia Ashbourne's clothes had been washed away, and despair filled her heart. She let her body bob with the furious seawater, but at a certain moment she felt a warm hand grasp her. "Ethan Blackwood!" Sophia Ashbourne suddenly opened her eyes, her pupils shining with hope. "Hold this, then hold on to me." Ethan Blackwood handed Sophia Ashbourne a life preserver made from pants and had her grab his other hand, then began swimming sideways towards the shore. Side swimming is the best way to conserve energy for long-distance swimming. After swimming about 20 meters towards the shore, he saw the vine Isabel Hawthorne had thrown floating on the water. "Ethan Blackwood, be careful, there's a shark." Just then, Isabel Hawthorne's scream rang out. Ethan Blackwood's heart leaped. He turned to look and saw the dorsal fin of a shark exposed above the water, swimming rapidly towards them. This was a tiger shark. Among sharks, it's the one responsible for the most human injuries. Encountering a shark in the water without clothes is even more dangerous. Sharks can detect the reflection of light on skin and mistake it for fish. And at this moment, Sophia Ashbourne's clothes had been washed away by the sea. Ethan Blackwood's heart sank to his throat. He gritted his teeth, immediately tied the vine around Sophia Ashbourne, and yelled to Isabel Hawthorne on the shore. "Pull hard." With Isabel Hawthorne's strength, it was unrealistic to pull two people ashore quickly. After all, sharks are incredibly fast in the ocean. Moreover, if he carried Sophia Ashbourne, Ethan Blackwood would be encumbered and have even less chance of survival. Furthermore, Sophia Ashbourne in the water would be the shark's primary target. The current situation was the best outcome Ethan Blackwood could achieve. First, have Isabel Hawthorne rescue Sophia Ashbourne, and then he could fight the shark with all his might. Ethan Blackwood, Sophia Ashbourne, who had been pulled ashore, shouted with tears in her eyes. However, Ethan Blackwood's figure was nowhere to be seen. The tide had receded, and the entire sea surface was dark and calm, like a sky-sized mirror. It was chilling, it was despairing. Sophia Ashbourne covered her mouth with her delicate hand, tears falling like a burst dam, one by one. At this moment, beneath the calm sea lurked an endless killing intent. Ethan Blackwood held his breath, watching the tiger shark swimming towards him from not far away. It seemed that even though Sophia Ashbourne, who had attracted the shark, was already ashore, the tiger shark still hadn't given up its attack. Thinking of this, Ethan Blackwood focused his attention to the extreme. The moment the shark lunged at him, he immediately grabbed the military knife tied to his back and stabbed into the seawater directly above the shark's head. Coincidentally, at this very moment, the tiger shark opened its gaping maw, preparing to bite Ethan Blackwood. And the instant it opened, its nose was exactly where Ethan Blackwood had just stabbed. Swish! The sharp military knife instantly pierced the shark's nose. The tiger shark roared in pain and thrashed wildly. The shark's most vulnerable parts are its nose and gills. Ethan Blackwood struck true and, without pausing, immediately withdrew The Chinese letter and stabbed again. Thwack! Thwack! Ethan Blackwood stabbed twice more, the blade piercing the tiger shark's gills both times. Scarlet blood instantly dyed the seawater. The tiger shark thrashed wildly in agony. Ethan Blackwood seized this opportunity, surfaced at top speed, and while roaring, he violently slapped the water with both hands. After doing this for a while, the tiger shark, out of fear, actually swam away sheepishly. Phew! Ethan Blackwood sighed in relief and looked up at the sky. The 2 minutes of life-and-death struggle felt like a century. If his actions had been slightly off, he would have become the tiger shark's prey. Both the attack points and roaring and slapping the water after gaining an advantage were the best ways to deal with sharks. Ethan Blackwood was fortunate, without any mistakes. He had successfully repelled the shark. Adjusting his breathing, Ethan Blackwood began swimming towards the shore, dragging his almost exhausted body. Ethan Blackwood had just reached the shore when he felt an impact, soft and fragrant into his embrace. I thought you were dead, boo-hoo. Sophia Ashbourne hugged Ethan Blackwood and cried loudly, her small fists hitting his body repeatedly. Each solid impact allowed her to feel more acutely that the person in front of her was real and alive. Ethan Blackwood took a deep breath, suppressing his racing heart. Damn it. You little girl, have you forgotten your current situation? If this continues, I won't be able to hold back. Sophia, about your clothes, Isabel Hawthorne, with teary eyes, reminded him softly from the side. Sophia Ashbourne. Immediately after, a piercing shriek, audible throughout half the jungle, echoed from the beach. Ethan Blackwood rubbed the bump on his head, unable to voice his bitterness. That little girl, Sophia Ashbourne, he had just saved her. Clearly, she was too excited and didn't understand the situation, hugging him voluntarily. It wasn't like he forced her. So why hit him? Despite his internal grumbling, the memory of the previous scene made Ethan Blackwood grin. As expected of the beauty standard of Shanghai University, after personal inspection, she was truly beyond reproach. About an hour later, the fish soup was ready. Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne slowly emerged from the triangular shelter. They were now wearing clothes woven from cattails and hibiscus tiliaceus by the skillful Isabel Hawthorne, which made Ethan Blackwood's eyes widen again. Different clothing styles highlight different temperaments. For someone like Sophia Ashbourne, who had the figure of a clothes rack, there was no outfit she couldn't carry off. Even clothes woven from grass could exude a beauty that blended aloofness and wildness. Forget everything you just saw and heard, Sophia Ashbourne said, her face still flushed, and glared at Ethan Blackwood, biting her teeth tightly. What did I just see? Oh, now that you mention it, I remember. Ow, Sophia, let's talk this out, don't hit me. The fish soup boiled with the grouper, dozens of small fish, and tender gooseweed tasted extremely fresh and delicious. Even without any seasonings, the natural savory flavor of the sea fish was exquisite. Cooked fish, unlike cured meat, would spoil if left overnight. On the island, there was no extra food to waste. The three of them finished every last drop of the soup, cleaning out all the food in the oil drum. After such a thrilling experience and a satisfying meal, all three were exhausted and fell asleep. The next morning, Isabel Hawthorne arranged large SOS signs with stones on the beach. They should have done this on the first day of being stranded, but it had been delayed due to various circumstances. After all, their goal was to leave the island safely, not to permanently survive there. The arduous survival here was for the day they could leave alive. Just signals aren't enough. During the day, we need to add fresh banana leaves and palm leaves to the bonfire, Ethan Blackwood said. Adding these plants to the bonfire. Under the high heat, the moisture in the fresh plants evaporated, and thick white smoke immediately rose from the fire, even from hundreds of meters away. This dense smoke could be seen. In addition to these two methods, they could also use reflective objects placed in the sunlight to try and reflect sunlight towards the sea. Light travels farther than smoke, with good luck and the right angle. This dazzling light could be seen from a great distance. However, the only reflective object they had was Ethan Blackwood's military knife, which was too precious to him. He couldn't be parted from it for a moment. Yesterday, during the fierce battle with the shark, without the military knife, he would likely have ended up as shark food. Ethan Blackwood looked quickly. It looks like something is coming towards us. Sophia Ashbourne stood on tiptoe and gazed into the distance. Ethan Blackwood followed Sophia Ashbourne's gaze and indeed saw a small black dot approaching. Could someone have come to rescue us? Immediately. Isabel Hawthorne's smile stiffened on her face, full of disappointment. Isn't this life raft from our ship? These 4 people must be those company employees who came for team building, Sophia Ashbourne deduced. At that time, on the luxury cruise ship, there weren't only classmates like Ethan Blackwood and Sophia Ashbourne, but also many other tourists. Ethan Blackwood raised his eyebrows, gripping his military knife tightly. Ethan Blackwood remained vigilant. Although the identities of the 4 people on the life raft were also stranded individuals, they might not necessarily be well-intentioned. Not everyone is willing to unite in times of danger, just like Guan Sheng and Lucas Everhart before them. Most people under duress reveal their true nature and become more ferocious. Therefore, Ethan Blackwood could not be certain whether the newcomers were friends or foes. As the life raft drew nearer, the 4 people on board began to wave at Ethan Blackwood. They were very excited, showing expressions of relief after surviving. Ethan Blackwood carefully observed these 2 men and 2 women. Seated at the front was a plump man in his 40s, appearing quite affluent, even after floating at sea for several days. Maintaining this physique indicated he was even heavier before. Clearly, he was the highest-ranking person among them. Beside him was a thin man, wearing a suit and tie, whose gaze towards the plump man was fawning. He was clearly his subordinate. As for the 2 women, one was dressed rather revealingly, even though she was a bit disheveled now. Her inherent allure couldn't be hidden. The other wore thick glasses and had a plain face. To put it kindly, she had a scholarly air, but to put it bluntly, she was a bit simple. However, what attracted Ethan Blackwood the most was the abundant equipment on the life raft. These are all good things. Ethan Blackwood nearly drooled. Each life raft, besides emergency fresh water and compressed rations, was equipped with a shovel, a fire axe, a first aid kit, and a telescope. If Ethan Blackwood had been able to get on that life raft earlier, his survival in the wild would have been much easier. But as a result, he was knocked unconscious by Sophia Ashbourne, which had angered him greatly at the time. Now, it turned out there was a life raft with equipment. I need to find a way to get their things. Ethan Blackwood grinned, a mischievous smile appearing. Sophia, what bad idea is this guy cooking up now? Isabel Hawthorne shivered upon seeing Ethan Blackwood's expression. She noticed that whenever Ethan Blackwood was about to do something mischievous, he would have this wicked look. This lady is pure and flawless. How would I know what this black-hearted fellow is thinking? Sophia Ashbourne shot Ethan Blackwood a glance and said proudly. At this moment, the life raft had reached the shore. After the four on their side conferred, the thin man, wearing a professional fake smile, extended his hand and approached Ethan Blackwood, introducing himself. Hello, my name is Joe Giant, and I am the general manager of Wanjin Group. This person was clearly a seasoned professional. He could tell at a glance that Ethan Blackwood was the decision-maker here. To communicate, it was best to approach him directly, although the two girls beside him were very eye-catching. Survival was the priority now. Ethan Blackwood. Ethan Blackwood extended his hand to shake his. Wanjin Group, that's one of the top 50 companies in our Yanlong country, Isabel Hawthorne whispered upon hearing Joe Giant's introduction. However, she wasn't particularly surprised. After all, the people on that cruise ship were either wealthy or influential. A top 50 company might impress ordinary people, but Isabel Hawthorne, being Sophia Ashbourne's childhood friend, considered a mere top 50 company, as insignificant as a small ant in the eyes of the Lin Group. Seeing that Isabel Hawthorne knew his company's name, Joe Giant's face immediately broke into an arrogant smile, and he confidently said, Indeed, it is one of Yanlong country's top 50 enterprises, Wanjin Group. May I ask if you are here to recruit employees? Ethan Blackwood's nonchalant question made Joe Giant momentarily awkward. However, being the general manager of a top 50 company, emotional control was his specialty. Little brother, you're quite humorous. As the saying goes, 100 years of cultivation to share the same boat. Both our groups were on the same ship. So it's fate. Now that we're stranded on the same deserted island, isn't that fate multiplied? Joe Giant's words made it sound like he was discussing something joyous. The reality was that both groups were in dire straits, struggling for survival against the odds. Sophia Ashbourne's mouth twitched. She walked aside to play with mud. She generally liked playing in water, but after yesterday's incident, she had developed a bit of a psychological shadow. Regardless of what she played, it was better than listening to this guy talk. As the daughter of a commercial magnate, she detested such rhetoric the most. Isabel Hawthorne also disliked these negotiations and went to tidy up the mineral water bottles and fishing traps. Manager Joe, please continue. Ethan Blackwood, however, wore a gentle smile. Did he really not know what the other party wanted? In a place like this, besides food, there was only drinking. Not to mention, he also had his own objectives. It's just this, little brother. Meeting his fate. Do you have any food? Joe Giant asked with a smile. Yes, grilled fish, lamb chops, and coconut juice. As Ethan Blackwood listed each food item, Joe Giant's mouth watered a little, as if imagining himself devouring the food. So, little brother, we four have been adrift at sea for so long, and we ran out of food 2 days ago. Could you give us some to fill our stomachs? Joe Giant said, excitedly rubbing his hands. No, Ethan Blackwood flatly refused. Food is limited. If you want to eat, you have to work. Little Ethan, you see, we're all starving. Our chests are sticking to our backs. How can we have the strength to work? Can you give us some food first? Joe Giant asked with a Chinese letter, bitter gourd face. Does your company give employees their salaries before they start working? Ethan Blackwood retorted. Not buying it. Joe Giant, why are you dawdling? I'm starving to death. Be careful or I'll deduct your salary when we get back. Before Joe Giant could say more, the plump man from nearby called out. Then, the plump man walked over and said to Ethan Blackwood, I am Cao Wanjin, the boss of Wanjin Group. Young man, give me the food. And I'll give you generous compensation when we return to the country. This plump man didn't treat himself as an outsider at all. He spoke with great wealth and arrogance, and his gaze immediately fixed on Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne, his eyes suddenly flashing with brilliant light. Tusk, Tusk, young man, you're living even better than me. Let those two accompany me for a night. And I'll double the compensation when we return to the country. Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne were instantly enraged. They spat mud, hitting Cao Wanjin's face. Ethan Blackwood chuckled coldly and reached for his knife, intending to approach Cao Wanjin. Cao Wanjin, having never encountered such a scene, ran and pondered. What? Have people in this world stopped recognizing money after floating at sea for a few days? As the chairman of Wanjin Group, with just a word, people would line up to visit his room at night. Seeing that both their negotiations were unsuccessful, the woman dressed flamboyantly and with a seductive expression came over. Hello. Young man, my name is Sue Manting. You are so handsome and heroic. A man with your chivalrous spirit surely wouldn't bear to see Manting Jai go hungry, right? Believe me. It's been starving here. This woman was clearly experienced. She subtly unbuttoned the top button and continuously sent flirty glances at Ethan Blackwood, speaking suggestive words. Green tea, vixen, little slut. Sophia Ashbourne gritted her teeth, her eyes filled with hostility towards the woman. At the same time, she warily observed Ethan Blackwood, wondering if he was being charmed by that woman. Sophia, you seem very stressed. Isabel Hawthorne began to devilishly whisper with a smile. HMPH. Why should I be stressed? Ethan Blackwood can do whatever he wants. I can't be bothered to manage him, Sophia Ashbourne said, turning her back, but despite her words, she couldn't help but steal glances from time to time. What made her very satisfied was that Ethan Blackwood remained unmoved by this woman. This was only natural. After experiencing girls like Sophia Ashbourne, Ethan Blackwood's immunity to beautiful women had reached its limit. No matter how beautiful, could anyone be more beautiful than Sophia Ashbourne? Seeing that Ethan Blackwood was unmoved, Sue Manting inevitably felt a sense of frustration. She had relied on these tactics to climb from a junior clerk to the position of financial director. Even old hands like Cao Wanjin couldn't control themselves around her. Yet this young man remained steadfast. Could it be that he liked the quiet type? Thinking this, Sue Manting immediately called out to the last person, the one with glasses and a dazed look, Zhaozu. Come here. Me. Zhaozu pushed up her glasses, pointing at herself somewhat dazedly. Ethan Blackwood was almost speechless. Don't people from these large companies only have money and sordid affairs between men and women in their heads? Can't they think of something noble? Stop this flashy stuff. You want to eat. Right, if you don't have the strength to work, then exchange your belongings. Ethan Blackwood grinned and finally stated his objective. Chapter 19. Sophia Ashbourne suffers from stomach pain. The moment Ethan Blackwood spoke, the four on the other side looked puzzled. Exchange what? We have no food or fresh water left, Joe Giant asked. Things on the life raft like the shovel. Ethan Blackwood stated his intentions directly, naming the items he desired. The shovel is a super artifact for wilderness survival. Even the Nepali military knife is not as good as the shovel, because their priorities are different. Although the shovel's sharpness is inferior to the military knife, in terms of functionality, the shovel is too powerful. A small shovel integrates the functions of a machete, a small bayonet, a window breaker, a saw, a ruler, a whistle, and a fire striker. If one plans to survive in the wild, no one would be without a shovel. After proposing to exchange for the shovel, Ethan Blackwood was actually already considering how to negotiate if they refused. After all, this shovel was too precious, and Ethan Blackwood didn't think they would exchange it for food. Just this broken shovel? Young man, why didn't you say so earlier? Here's the shovel for you. Now give me the lamb chops. To Ethan Blackwood's utter surprise, Cao Wanjin picked up the shovel, which was priceless in the wild, and threw it directly to him. Wow, is this what a rich person is like? If he had a little more knowledge, he wouldn't have called this a broken shovel. Ethan Blackwood, as if finding a treasure, began fiddling with the shovel. Boss, how could you exchange the shovel for food? Joe Giant said anxiously. clearly recognizing its value. But it was too late. The shovel was already in Ethan Blackwood's hands. What? I'm starving to death. Should I keep this broken shovel and dig my own grave later? Cao Wanjin retorted irritably, patting Zhou Jian. But when he saw Ethan Blackwood disassemble the shovel and witness its various functions, his face turned green. Damn it, I was too hasty. He, a boss who spent his days indulging in debauchery, hardly knew the functions of these survival tools. In his eyes, besides the compressed biscuits, dried beef, and fresh water, everything else on the life raft was trash. But after Ethan Blackwood demonstrated its functions, even a fool should have realized how precious the shovel was. Well, young man, since you've given me such a good item, shouldn't you give me more lamb chops? Cao Wanjin said, rubbing his hands. He was a wealthy magnate. Being a top 50 company meant he was a top business elite. In business, integrity is very important, so he had no intention of reneging. He just wanted to cut his losses. At least. He wanted to exchange for more food. Then, can you at least give me a cup of water as a gift? Cao Wanjin, showing his true merchant nature, bargained all the way. All right. Fine, Ethan Blackwood said magnanimously, and handed Cao Wanjin a bamboo tube filled with water. Cao Wanjin, who hadn't eaten or drunk for 2 days and nights, immediately cupped the lamb chop and fresh water and began to feast. Why did you give him an extra cup of water? In my opinion, he should have been left to die of thirst. Sophia Ashbourne was still resentful of Cao Wanjin's request and said hatefully, we still need labor. Otherwise, catching small fish and shrimp every day. How can we improve our lives? Although Sophia Ashbourne and Isabel Hawthorne helped out every day, all the physical labor was ultimately left to Ethan Blackwood. Therefore, there were still many things Ethan Blackwood couldn't do. After negotiating with these people, Ethan Blackwood concluded that at least Cao Wanjin was someone he could cooperate with, although he was a greasy tycoon. He seemed genuine. As for Zhou Jian, Ethan Blackwood felt he was deeply calculating. But regardless, he had to get their things first and then gain the upper hand in the cooperation. Ethan, the food for the 3 of us. At this point, Zhou Jian came to ask again. I think that first aid kit looks good. 1 first aid kit for a 3-person meal package. Previously, finding a box of antibiotics had made Ethan Blackwood extremely excited, and a whole first aid kit was enough to make Ethan Blackwood ecstatic for a night. The emergency medicines and medical instruments inside could save lives at critical moments. Can we exchange something else? Zhou Jian clearly understood the preciousness of this first aid kit. Compared to the shovel, it was no less valuable. You should think carefully, what is a first aid kit for? Isn't it to save lives? If people are starving to death, who are we going to save with the first aid kit? Ethan Blackwood's sentence hit the core issue. Zhou Jian's eyes flashed with a hint of gloom, and he gave Ethan Blackwood a deep look. In the past, a young man like this would have had no right to speak to him, and to think he was dictating terms here. Now they were on a deserted island, and he still had to bow to the boss. And negotiations were like facing an important client. This feeling made him disgusted and repressed. The foolish boss didn't understand anything and easily traded away the shovel. And THIS Chinese letter in front of him was greedy, wanting to take the first aid kit as well. Damn them, they all deserve to die. Suppressing the hatred in his heart, Zhou Jian put on his professional fake smile again. Fine. I'll trade with you. Ethan Blackwood couldn't be bothered to care about the other party's thoughts, as long as he got the items. Exchanging for these items used up 4 lamb chops, and their food supply was now low. Fortunately, the 5 fishing traps provided about 40 small fish daily, which was enough to maintain the minimum food intake. At night, Ethan Blackwood lay by the bonfire. His sleep was light, and especially with 4 strangers arriving today, he had to be more cautious. However, Ethan Blackwood was awakened by a faint humming sound beside him. A hum. Opening his eyes, he saw Sophia Ashbourne, who was lying by the bonfire, clutching her stomach. Her forehead was covered in fine beads of cold sweat, and she was curled up, her brows furrowed in pain. "Sophia, what's wrong?" Ethan Blackwood asked softly. "I'm fine," Sophia Ashbourne said weakly, holding her stomach. Sophia, is your stomach hurting again?" Isabel Hawthorne said groggily, rubbing her eyes, and asked worriedly. "It must be because of the irregular diet these past few days." Hearing this, Ethan Blackwood quickly rummaged through the first aid kit. As expected, there were no medicines for stomach problems. There was no help for it. These emergency kits usually only contained antibiotics, bandages, and some solutions for cleaning external wounds. Stomach medicine was not included. "Ah!" Sophia Ashbourne's condition showed no signs of improvement. She rolled on the ground, clutching her stomach, clearly in unbearable pain. Isabel Hawthorne watched, her heart filled with anxiety, but there was nothing she could do. "Isabel, you stay here and watch. I'll take Sophia Ashbourne to find medicine," Ethan Blackwood instructed. Then scooped up Sophia Ashbourne in his arms and ran into the jungle with a torch. The jungle at night was very dangerous, but to alleviate Sophia Ashbourne's illness, they had to take the risk. However, on the way, Ethan Blackwood frowned, sensing something was amiss, but he couldn't quite pinpoint what it was. Given the urgency, he didn't dwell on it. In his arms, Sophia Ashbourne's body temperature continued to rise, and she was soaked in cold sweat. Her small hands gripped Ethan Blackwood's clothes, her knuckles turning pale, and she bit her lip tightly, sobbing softly. "Ethan Blackwood, will I die?" Sophia Ashbourne whispered weakly, her voice trembling. "No, don't be afraid, we'll have medicine soon." Under the torchlight, Ethan Blackwood searched frantically in the jungle. "Found it!" After searching for a moment, Ethan Blackwood's eyes lit up, and his gaze locked onto a tree. This tree had unique cone-shaped flower buds, simple alternate leaves, and pointed young shoots. Its bark resembled camouflage. Ethan Blackwood cut open the bark with a knife, and immediately, milky white sap began to flow out. This was the milk tree. Its sap was like milk, and drinking it could repair the stomach lining and alleviate stomach pain. "Here, drink this, and the pain will stop." Ethan Blackwood lifted Sophia Ashbourne and brought her mouth close to the tree trunk. Sophia Ashbourne licked it in small sips, dazed with pain. The milky white sap felt very comfortable as it went down her throat. It seemed